We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
People date their projectors, but they marry their screens. So as I think about that projection screen, it stays, but the projector sometimes goes away. The LED TV gets mounted on the wall, the screen goes up, and it stays.
I brought this because I like it.
Well, hang on, you've just...
No, I like it. This is brilliant, but I like this.
On this episode, can Amazon change the digital signage market? Projectors versus video walls, and LG's got touch panels that can stretch and make buttons. This is episode 716 of AVWeek, Projectors versus Video Walls. Welcome to AVWeek, episode 716, recorded on May 5th, 2025. I'm Patrick Norton, in for Tim Albright, who is en route to Madrid on a secret mission. You're going to see him back in the chair next week. Harman, if you haven't heard this week, is purchasing Sound United for $350 million from Masimo Corporation. Now, Masimo was primarily a medical technology company. They bought Sound United for $1 billion in 2022 as part of what I think they anticipated was a huge amount of consumer sales after they won a sterling lawsuit against Apple. Hint, it did not work out that way. The shares dropped, things changed, and the end result is that Harman, who is a wholly owned subsidiary of Samsung, should you care, bought Sound United for about $350 million. Now, this is Denon, Marantz, Bowers & Wilkins, Polk, Class A Definitive, and a couple others. Online rumors not too long ago was that Sound United was, let's say, probably not being managed in the best possible manner for a consumer electronics company, or was simply fighting market sources, was going to shut down, which, if you have a home theater, which I do, is kind of a big deal. It is also going to be interesting to watch how Harman fits this in with JBL and their other in-house brands and how they do over time. I just mentioned this. This is a commercial AV show. This is not a residential show. But honestly, I just want to remind all of us that industry consolidation is just going to keep impacting us in weird, strange, and hopefully once in a while wonderful ways, but mostly in ways that complicate availability of products or your ability to get driver updates and other things. And that's not going to change as we move forward unless business as we know it changes a lot. And on that bright and cheerful and dramatic note, I want to introduce Willie Franklin, who spent many years as a senior technology specialist at Otterbein University. He's retired and now bringing the jams as Franklin DJ and Event Services. And if you're doing a party in Ohio, give the man a call.
Awesome.
Michelle LeRae, CEO at Itavi. I got the name right, the Itavi. Do I have that right, Michelle?
You did. You have it right.
A purpose-built consortium designed to save the AV world. And Susan Wilhite, the Senior Director of Business Development at Bluefin International, providing custom signage displays for consumer-focused branding and engagement. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, indeed.
Big story on Commercial Integrator, or a big announcement. The impact of Amazon in the pro AV digital space is what we're thinking about here, and I suspect Susan will have a bit to say on our first subject. Corbett is announcing that they're bringing Corbett's Anywhere, its cloud-based CMS, to the Amazon Sign Stick, which sells for a whopping $99.99 direct from Amazon.com. What the story didn't get into, because it was more of a press release, is that there are already a long list of digital signage content management software partners, many of which I suspect are obscure enough that just about everybody on this panel or in the world will have to Google them, except probably Susan. On one level, I feel like this is a capsule story for a lot of what's going on in AV these days in terms of bringing things in-house or doing it DIY. Susan, I'm going to toss this to you first because this is your corner of the industry. You know, is this a big deal, or is this just, yet another moment where somebody's trying to figure out a way to expand some part of their footprint?
I think this can be a huge opportunity and also have some big challenges. So, we have to acknowledge Amazon's growing influence. That's undeniable. And, I don't want to make this an infomercial about Bluefin, but we love our ecosystem partners. I'm constantly being asked, how do I love digital signage. I want to get into it. How do I do it? So this could be a great entry level, moving those customers away from print into digital signage, maybe faster. I guess maybe bad signage is better than no signage.
Harsh, but fair.
That's what I was thinking.
Are you, it might come at an expense of quality, reliability, customization, and like I said, that we don't want the perception of bad signage, but maybe you can help get that person into signage, into other entry levels to the next steps, and, building with the ecosystem partners and offering different opportunities. So, we really are focused on allowing specialization in niche markets to grow beyond the standard offerings, and, each project is unique and different. And so that's why it'll be interesting to see how things pan out.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because as I was digging into this, I was surprised that one, at this point, I'm old enough where I should never be surprised that there are 32 different people competing in a market I'm not familiar with. But I just remember being like, thinking to myself, wow, this has to be a little overwhelming. Like, I'm a restaurant. I want to do my own digital signage. I don't want to deal with the quote from my AV integrator or for the people I called up. And I just thought to myself, okay, the next step is who in your family are you going to call to sort through the 19 different options on this page, or however many it is. Michelle, Willie, any thoughts on this?
I'll jump right in there because my former university, I was the go-to person for digital signage, having pitched the concept and rolled it out. The greatest pain point to digital signage is content management. That said, I want to believe that Amazon's foray into this is a step in the right direction, particularly for smaller shops. People who may not have the financial bandwidth to put a robust system in of media players, lots of storage, lots of software and calendaring, so that what I'll call it the super Fire Stick. And I know that's not the product name. But to that end, it really comes through as plug and play technology, right? A lot of us have stepped into retail spaces or restaurant, and you see a bit of digital signage right there next to the cash register. That used to be print, right? So that visual, I'm trying to think of the best term without really tilting the boat towards something crazy, but the visual impact of digital signage is undeniable. I mean, you walk in, it grabs your attention first and foremost. And if you could do it at a low cost, it's a great thing. But one of the things that Susan said with regards to, bad signage is better than no signage, it's a fine line because that's a valid point. It may not be ideal, but it's there. But when it's really done well, it is phenomenally effective. It can really help your business grow. You can upscale ideas. You can push incredible messaging out with a robust system. And that's not to negate something small, pocket size, if you will. If it meets your need at that moment, and if it allows you to deliver what you need to deliver to your customer at a reasonable price, and if it's scalable, and then again, most importantly, if content management is doable for you and your team, then you probably have a winning solution, right? Regardless of the name brand that's on it. For me, I like the big, robust engine that's capable of doing a billion things at once.
I think you hit it right on the nail in the sense of, too, this is a great entry-level signage application where it specializes to a niche market. You know, if you're a corporate or a museum or a healthcare, this is probably not your option that you're looking at, because you're going to need, touch capabilities. You're going to need a more robust, probably cloud platform, security requirements, things that, an embedded OS only has to offer.
Yeah, when I read the article, I read it a couple times because I kept thinking maybe they buried the lead. Because I'm like, oh, memory stick and cloud CRM, and what's this press release about? I'm hoping there was something revolutionary. That would be a hard no. Nothing nothing to see here.
True.
I mean, ultimately, I think the people that want to go buy that, since we already have memory sticks and we already know how to do cloud CRM, those are not our customers. We're not selling to mom and pops. So to Susan and Willie's point, all signage is good signage, and some signage is better than no signage, and yay, welcome. And so, yeah, it's going to be fine at Sally's Chicken Hut if she wants to do that. But on an enterprise level or an education, K through 12, higher ed, children apparently are kleptomaniacs. People steal things. We're not going to be putting some memory stick somewhere. It's like when I had customers, I was selling ClickShare, and they were like, why wouldn't we just use an Apple TV? And I'm like, it's not meant to do that. How are you going to manage that? And they couldn't. And that's why they ended up having to go with it. So, yeah, I mean, that's fine. Good. Yay. I got to go to the Digital Signage Expo for the first time in my life last year with Chris Margo. I love digital signage. I wish more integrators would pay attention to it and actually focus on it, right? And do it well instead of just doing it because their client has asked them to do it. I get it. Nothing to see there. Thanks, Corbin. Good luck with that. Yeah.
I will say to Amazon's credit, I do appreciate that they did not build a CMS from the ground up, and that they allow you to choices. And I can only hope the partners in there aren't immediately trying to lock people into a 12-month commitment or something, because having dealt with 3 or 4 different digital signage CMS systems, some are better than others, and some are just absolutely atrocious. So I will give them credit for giving choices, because it's kind of astonishing to see what passes for a content management system. And I'll just leave it at that. Oh, my goodness. We got a story up on AVNation.tv, education grade projectors. Robert Heron's talking about basically kind of the state of projectors. It is targeted at education, but it pretty much applies to any corporate environment. Basically looking at where they are, what you need, why laser versus bulb can be so important, especially for long-term investments, and kind of guides folks into making choices around that. I wanted to ask the panel where you see projectors and video walls these days, because video walls are obviously in so many situations such a vastly superior technology, and they also cost orders of magnitudes more in almost any installation at this point, and are certainly in the context of the budget of your average public school or modestly funded university are insanely expensive compared to a projector. And I say that with a lot of love and affection there. Are you folks, where do you see video walls? Where do you see the industry moving? Are video walls ever going to get do you anticipate them ever becoming as affordable as projectors are now? Who's up for, no one wants to leap on that.
I will dive in there from an affordability standpoint. Yeah, that's the Achilles tendon that makes a lot of people go, no, I don't think so. But for me, I put video walls and projection technology kind of in 2 categories, if you will. Video walls, I think of from a revenue generation standpoint, and projection from a pedagogy standpoint, or LCD panels on the wall. So for the deployments that I had hands on where video walls were king, it truly was a decision that was based on the potential to generate revenue. So you had external partners who loved the opportunity at a name scrolling across the bottom, or local retailers that would love to showcase their ad. In other words, they will underwrite some of the cost for that for the integrator and the institution that may have been using that tool for the sake of branding, right? And that was great for everybody. It seemed to work. From a teaching standpoint, I don't really ever foresee a video wall application for instruction as we think about pedagogy. Certainly projection technology, LCD panels can be very effective, but even both of those truly demands a lot of thought with the educators, a lot of conversation with the educators, with the architects, with the AV integrators to get everybody on the same page. And I say that from a standpoint that you can put in a huge LCD TV and display whatever content you desire. But there's a methodology that you're really governed by when it comes to using it effectively. And that's, of course, we think about terms of height from a visibility of content. We think about what you should and shouldn't display on that panel. In other words, you wouldn't necessarily want to hold a not a town hall meeting, but a budget meeting where you're looking at spreadsheets, where the information, though high resolution, is so small, it's very difficult to see in many rooms where that panel is going to be undersized for the amount of seats in there. So we shift to projection technology where you're able to really scale up that image on the wall. And you're able to present more visually impactful information from that standpoint. If I can kind of pivot just a little bit, just thinking about bulb versus laser and LED, light engine and projection technology, that shift to LED and laser was long overdue. The greatest challenge, in my opinion, with projectors is maintenance. If you don't have a robust preventative maintenance program or you're quick to resolve bulb issues, the downtime can feel like a tremendous loss. A loss not so much financially, but a loss with regards to confidence when you look at the stakeholders. Because anytime you're not able to deliver your message because of a small thing such as a bulb failure, it really kills that momentum. It really impacts your ability to go forward with innovation, because you've got to sell people not on the technology, but on the reliability of what you're looking to put in.
I actually had to laugh when I saw this topic because, and I'll tell you why, because this has been an ongoing topic for years, and I'm going to date myself. I sold large projection screens for Stewart Film Screen, and you have to acknowledge that shift. I mean, displays are becoming increasingly more prominent in scenarios, not only in higher education, but, you know, when you're looking at classrooms, lecture halls, public spaces, stadiums, you do need something that is larger. You can't, I mean, how many times have you sat in a, what am I looking for? Like just in a room, an office, corporate office room, and they threw up, they have a display on the wall. They moved from a projector to a display, and you're like, what does that say? No matter what age you are, you still can't see it. So, I mean, what is the combination? You have to be flexible. It's not always either this or that. It could be a combination, a hybrid, I mean, I still think projection is needed for large venues. And maybe because large projection, Stuart, is close to my heart because it was my first job in AV. But you also have to, I know I'm dating myself, but you also have to be flexible because, common areas are interactive displays. We do a lot in higher education. And sometimes they're interactive displays. Sometimes they're smaller, more durable displays in labs or, showing meetings. And, a lot of facilities are moving away from paper to digital. So they're wanting to do small screens that, show the scheduling that's going on. So, but, you have to have the ability to be able to integrate, different sizes, whether you want touch. So it really, you have to look at the whole landscape. But I still think this is going to be a continuing topic. And that's why I laugh, because this topic we brought up, 10, 11 years ago, and we're still talking about it.
Yes, we are.
Right up there with how to get young people into AV.
Well, the thing that we're not debating over in this is, and I feel like this is such a factual statement, people date their projectors, but they marry their screens. So as I think about that projection screen, it stays, but the projector sometimes goes away. The LED TV gets mounted on the wall, the screen goes up, and it stays.
Yeah, I mean, I've always found it interesting. I worked for a while at ViewSonic, and they had tons of small projectors, and they had a huge education division that was selling a lot of the interactive flat panel. And we never actively tried to sell projectors, but ultimately there's a lot of bang for your buck. And not all school districts are created equal and have budgets for things like interactive flat panels, right? Or smart boards in a classroom and their projection all day long. I was just glad that at least there's that opportunity, to your point, Willie, to have something where we can set it and forget it, right? And we don't have to worry about the consumables and the bulbs and buying the wrong bulbs and then having them blow up the projector or whatever the case may be, the black market bulb.
Or simply not fit when you need them.
Yeah. But, the industry has transformed itself through the years. In other words, the flat panel TVs have become kind of ubiquitous in a lot of areas. Yeah, there are many cases where they're undersized, but they work, and it's kind of a set it and forget it. I mean, you throw it on the wall, and so long as the batteries are good and the remote, you're good. On the side of projectors, they're kind of a set it and forget it for the most part. Most of the units that I encounter out there are indeed laser or LED. And over time, the manufacturers really caught on when it came to maintenance, that you didn't have to get a ladder or a scissor lift to get up there, take the unit off the mount to replace the bulb. The bulb was accessible from that inverted position. That was a huge change, absolutely huge.
I have to laugh because something I've been hammering on for literally at this point decades is all engineers should have to use the product in its real world environment. I've talked about that in primarily in consumer electronics. I've talked about it with automobiles. It's amazing how simple changes can make everyone's life so much easier. It's just, oh my goodness. Shifting gears for a second, LG's shown off at SID Display Week a 100 pixel per inch automotive stretchable display. And I was trying to kind of wrap my head around stretchable display because one thing LG is saying that it's going to turn every interior space into a display. Now they're talking about automotive, but we find a lot of stuff starting out in automotive and moving in other directions. But what's really wild about this is when the screen is touched, the display can go from flat and actually create custom touch buttons on the fly. So the idea is that you will have this massive visual tactical feedback, and it's going to bridge that gap between, old school buttons in a car and, being able to actually function when you're in the car. I am incredibly old school with my automotive devices for any of a number of reasons I won't bore anybody with. But Tim was like, why not bring this to AV? Could this be the rebirth of control system panels to this kind of feedback, whether it is, tactile and creating buttons or haptic? Is this a rebirth of the control system panel? And part of me was like, I didn't realize there was this big of a problem with control panels, or is this looking forward? Are people trying to eliminate control panels? Are they frustrated with control panels? Michelle, this might be a good one for you. Do people want to move from control panels and go to voice control, which just sounds awful for everyone, from the integration through the support, and the end user? But that also may be the fact that I spent years having voices that, with my voice, apparently does not work for any voice control system. It's finally gotten better with, in the cell phone era. But, Michelle, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, voice is terrifying. I don't know. I don't know. I like innovations in everything. I don't think people are looking for innovation in their touch panel as much as maybe they're looking for better programming behind the touch panel, driving it. I mean, not all UX designers are created equal, right?
Many
So
UX
there's
designers
that.
should not be called UX designers, but
Right.
that
And
might be a
I mean, I
little harsh.
remember years ago, I interviewed the then president of Mimo Monitors because they had come out with a haptic touch panel that just blew my mind. I was at ISC. This had to be like 2018, I think. And I was like, that is the coolest thing ever. So if it looked rough and you touched the smooth glass screen, like it felt rough. And I was like,
Wow.
mind blown. That ugly skin thing that can morph, what is that? What problem? No. Ooh, I think we need prettier things. That's what I think. That's my takeaway. We need prettier. I mean, some of these touch panels that our manufacturers are making, they look like they should go in a trailer out at a plant, and that it's explosion proof. I'm like, who designed this? When I was at ADI, I started specifying RTI into projects strictly because they had such pretty touch panels. I was like, why don't we have that? Why do the Resi people have that? I'm gonna steal it. So I think we need prettier, and I don't think that's very pretty. I mean, but it's cool. It seems neat. I just don't know. I got a new car and I can't figure out half the controls on it. It has too much technology, and I live in technology, so go figure.
I still laugh because I'd rented a car a couple of years ago, and I drive profoundly, mostly old vehicles. Like my daily driver is like an 83 240 wagon. This is a very tactile automobile. And I'm somewhere in Reno in one of those places where I am 2 feet from a concrete wall on one side and 2 feet from a tractor trailer on the other. And the rental vehicle I'm in explodes in what I now think of as full disco mode, because both crash sensors and lane change sensors are going berserk because it's convinced I'm either about to hit the wall or the tractor trailer, and the dashboard literally looks like I have entered in a nightclub in Las Vegas, and all I could think was like, no, this is just not necessary. And you go through the manual, you can turn everything off, but sometimes I just want something that does not freak me out while I'm in the middle of a 70 mile an hour right angle turn in rush hour traffic. The Volvo, it certainly does not. It just does what I ask it to do, and it does it quietly, and it does it with an aesthetic. Michelle, I understand. I laughed because I heard somebody a while back say, like, I don't understand why people are blah 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 blah, and I'm like, man, that's a $50,000 set of furniture in that room. They might want something that balances it rather than standing out like, you open up a copy of Architectural Digest, you don't find a lot of frames from Target in there. I'm just saying. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying, aesthetically, it's nice when things fit.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was going to say, Patrick, when you brought up all the lights and everything, when I first read stretchable touch buttons, I'm like, what is that going to do for the Staples Easy button? Now what are we going to get? Like, I mean, coming from a digital signage LCD manufacturer, we rely on, interactive, reliable touch interfaces. We haven't implemented any stretchable buttons or anything like that yet, but, we make durable, for demanding environments, touchscreens, interactive screens, for control rooms, for, museums. And, it's the evolution of, control, going beyond just the interaction with a tablet or touch panels, So, it's kind of exciting, but at the same time, I'm with you. You probably still roll your window down in your car, instead of having an electric button, but
only on one vehicle in the fleet.
There's nothing wrong with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I
Right.
said, the first thing I thought of is that Staples Easy button. What does that mean now?
Well, it's funny because one of the things I see when you look at mission control environments, and these are serious people, right? If I am running a massive power plant, if I am running a refinery, if I am dealing with the subway system in New York City or something like that, everything has to work. Period.
Yeah.
Right? 24/7, 365. Failure or even a temporary reboot is really problematic. But you look at some of the stuff that's starting to come out where you're moving to a video wall and your video wall is working with your operators at their control station. But it is a really wild idea that, yes, I could potentially touch the screen where the red light has gone off and I can adjust a valve, or I can shut something down, or I can initiate, some control action. And that's incredibly compelling, as long as I believe it's going to work. And that's the part where it gets exciting. And Michelle, you called out programmers. I think one of the most frustrating things we have is you can have this magnificent idea and this incredible hardware, and we have to have the programmers that can make those actually work together, to fulfill the promise.
Trying to get Steve Greenblatt to start a boot camp, but wish in one hand, guys. Wish in one hand. Well, and real quick, I was also thinking about that that acquisition. What was it? Sound United.
Yeah.
So a medical device and monitor company buys a portfolio of audio products. What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
Well,
nothing. That's weird. What synergies were they trying to recognize?
So they were in the middle of a lawsuit with Apple over the technology that Apple uses to detect pulse or heartbeats or something along those lines. So in my theory at this point is that they thought there was going to be a big win, a big payout, and it was going to afford them to put their smartwatch devices in every retail environment on the planet. That's a gross oversimplification. Please, Massimo, don't shoot me. But essentially, there was in the CEO of the company at the time, there was a synergy he could leverage. I don't think everything worked out to plan, because their stock almost immediately dropped considerably because it was a lot of money. I don't think the synergy between having spent a lot of time, I've done a podcast for years about home theater, and there's the while Definitive and Bowers and Wilkinson may look incredibly consumer to a medical technology company. Nobody's going to confuse those with Google Nest or any of a number of extremely consumer devices in the way they're positioned and sold in a place like Best Buy or something like that. I think it was, like a lot of things that have, big money and mergers behind them, I think that there can be an idea in someone's head that maybe has a difficult relationship or birthing process out in the real world.
So they're having a fever dream and they didn't realize it.
I like fever dream.
Yeah, for them, it was a big purchase, right?
Yeah.
And when they sold it to Samsung, that was like couch change. I mean, the last big deal Samsung did was Harman. That was 2017, $8 billion.
Yeah.
This was all $350 million. Literally, they had a bunch of people diving into couches across the pond and just pulling some change out and said, "Yeah, let's go buy that. Why
Holy
not?
cow.
We can." I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if they look for a car angle with that acquisition, automotive, since that's really the reason they bought Harman in the first place, is automotive. All roads lead to automotive. So I'd be curious to see where that extrapolates to.
We'll find out.
That is one to watch.
Yeah, it's I hate to use phrases like integrated into our brand portfolio for an extended, you know what I mean? But it's going to be very interesting to watch, because they've got a lot of high-end brands, a lot of high-end marketing prowess inside of Harman in terms of the consumer electronics side. And yes, the big money, the staggering amount of money is in the deals they do in the automotive environment. I am super curious to see what they do with this bundle of companies and how. And mostly, I think just please keep Polk speakers fantastic for the money. Don't screw up my Denon AVR. I have selfish motivations for wanting this to be successful.
Well, I wonder if there was any thought, certainly with regards to wearable technology, but as you mentioned about the automotive standpoint, there's certainly lots of impressive engineering that's happening in automotive. So when I think about sensory perception, whether you're too close to the car, to your left or right, forward of you, about to hit the wall behind you, but what about the steering wheel? What about that feedback mechanism of being able to monitor the health and well-being of that occupant that's holding the wheel? Was there a thought along the lines of what systems can we engineer to gain a bit of market share in that unexplored area? We certainly know that during automotive crashes, with automation, one's able to alert first responders. You can extrapolate the data almost like a black box recorder of how fast the vehicle was going, whether the headlights, windshield wipers were on, whether the brakes were deployed at the moment of impact, so on and so forth. So there's lots of data to be gained from that. And maybe, just maybe, they were looking at the big global impact of what it means to re-engineer or rethink the interior of our cars.
Well, that's certainly something Massimo could chase in the future, right? Because at this point, there's essentially the core technologies, and they've gotten rid of all the consumer electronic stuff for the most part, at least the audio. Michelle, I will say Fever Dream, I think, is a pretty good.
Fever Dream is better than saying, hey, that was a stupid decision. Although I was told that stupid is a bad word. You should never say it. Instead, you should say, hey, intelligence is always chasing you, but apparently you're a fast runner.
That would be gracious. I don't think any CEO wants one of their decisions to be judged as a fever dream at any time or place. So that's pretty much going to wrap things up for AV Week this week. I think it's a beautiful place to jump off. Willie, where can people find out, talk to me about your social medias, or where can people look to find out more about what you're doing these days?
Social media for me will be LinkedIn. You can find me, Willie Franklin, at LinkedIn, and you can also reach me at franklinDJservices@gmail.com.
Michelle, where can people track you down online?
Just LinkedIn. Michelle Lorette. My company is Itave Technology Advisors, both on LinkedIn, so catch me there.
And Susan.
Ditto. LinkedIn. You can find me as Susan Wilhite on LinkedIn or susan.wilhite@thebluefin.com.
Thank you all so much for participating. I actually really enjoyed the conversation today. And this, ladies and gentlemen, should you be stumbling into someone's office and wondering what it is AV Week, episode 716. I'm Patrick Norton in for Tim Albright. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like the podcast and you're not already subscribing, please search AV Week on your favorite podcatching tool.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is Erin Marmoran of EdTech. The world of higher ed AV is growing rapidly. That's why each month we hear from the best and brightest from colleges and universities all over the U.S. Check out EdTech on avnation.tv or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.